So the topic for today is neurodivergent inclusion. So we're really going to be talking about trying to understand how neurodivergence shows up in the workplace and what we can do about it. So let's get started. Before we move into the content, I want to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples of this land. I am joining you today from the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. This includes the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina, the Yarnakota, and the Goodstoney First Nations. This is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Battle River Territory Districts 5 and 6. We are located where the two rivers meet, and this place, Mohkinstsis, or Elbow in Blackfoot, is now currently known as the city of Calgary. I encourage you all to jot down in the chat if you happen to know what territories you are on. We'd love to see whose territories you are joining us from today. And while you're doing that, I'll just point out the Whose Land app that we have on our screen. It's a great little app that uses the GPS in whatever device you connect with, either directly on a browser or on your phone or tablet, and lets you know some history. There's some storytelling videos on there. It's really a very useful app, so we highly recommend it as part of those 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. Before we jump in again to our content today, just want to let you know what you have access to today in our Zoom meeting. You can use the chat, and I see the chat going, being used extensively, so that's awesome. If you have questions, please use the Q&A instead of the chat. We do have somebody monitoring that, and there will be a Q&A session near the end of our session today. If you need closed captioning, would like to activate them, there's a show captions button, that CC button that you also have access to. Other than that, due to the large size of the group today, you will not be able to put your microphone on for this session. I'm just briefly going to introduce myself. My name is Angèle Lalonde. My pronouns are she and her. I'm currently the Director of Human Resources at CCDI Consulting. You can see a little bit of my background there just really briefly. I started out my career as a teacher, have a Bachelor of Education, and then ended up, for a variety of reasons, running a consulting company and getting my HR certification in order to facilitate that. And then also after that ended due to a sale of the company, I did some English as a second language and Canadian cultural values, business, English and business values, teaching to newcomers before I joined 3.5 years ago, CCDI Consulting. So due to my background in both HR and in teaching, I often lend a hand with some of the delivery of the training here. I have a guest today, a very special guest, Kristin Light. Kristin, would you like to introduce yourself? I think you're probably the most knowledgeable on yourself.
Gosh, I hope so. If someone else is a better expert on me than me, please reveal yourself in the chat, because I have questions. Hi, everybody. I'm Kristin Light. I'm here wearing 2 hats today. I'm a senior engagement strategist with and specialist with On Express, which is a transit consortium in Southern Ontario. We are working on the GO train line for one of the Metrolinx projects. And I'm also a workplace neuro-inclusion specialist. And of all side hustles, this is one that found me. I didn't go seeking it out, it chose me. And I absolutely love it, having a specialty in this area. I'm a longtime entrepreneur as well. I was co-founder of African Light Productions. We ran 2 event venues in downtown Toronto. And I am also a vintage dance specialist. I owned a studio in Toronto for many years and have performed in many different countries and many different historic theaters and fancy places like that. So I love to say that my career is split between the boardroom and the ballroom. And I speak a lot on neuro-inclusion and mental health, suicide prevention in particular. And those neuro-inclusion and suicide prevention are two areas we're really focusing on at On Express right now under a grant program that was we were invited to thanks to the Canadian Association of Supportive Employment.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kristin. Multifaceted, very interesting. And we're going to be hearing a lot more from Kristin a bit later on after we sort of level set our understanding of the topic. Before we move into that, again, we have some exciting news. CCDI Consulting has been acquired by Diversio. Diversio is a leader in diversity, equity, and inclusion solutions. They have experience with working with organizations across the globe, spanning over 35 countries. And they have an academically validated platform that is very slick, very impressive, that measures, tracks, and improves DEI. And we just made this announcement on Monday, so it's Wednesday today. It feels like it was a month ago, but it really was just a few days ago. So it's fairly new. Just wanted to let you all know that that we are now one group under Diversio. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to look at some key terms, definitions, current state of neurodivergence and neurodiversity in Canada. We're going to just touch on really briefly, sort of in sort of big themes, what the challenges and strategies for overcoming the obstacles might be. And then we're going to head right into our discussion with Kristin, who has, as you've heard, a wealth of experience in this area. And then we'll end with some of your questions that our colleague Apurva is going to be monitoring for us. So we hope that you're going to, at the end of this, be able to describe a little bit the current state and identify those challenges that neurodivergent individuals may face at work. And then come away with a few practical strategies of inclusion for those individuals. So we like to start off our sessions with a little bit of participation. So I invite you to take out your cameras if you want and just scan the QR code, or else go to a browser on whatever device you have handy. pollev.com/idea should get you there. This will be an anonymous poll. We'll just get a little idea of who's in the room and what your previous knowledge is on the topic. So I'm going to leave that up for a quick second. I'm going to put in the chat this website just so that I can move on to the questions. And anybody who needs it, it's right there. So we have a set of questions here. I see people have already started answering. Do you know someone who is neurodivergent? So far, we've got 83% of the people in the room saying that they do. We've got a few people admitting that they're not too sure, and that's appropriate because you may suspect, or people may just not have told you, and so you haven't been made aware of it. That's a huge possibility and very common indeed. And to your knowledge, you don't know, right? No, I don't know anybody that I know of that could be neurodivergent, and you may not know what we mean by that term. So that's also an appropriate response. So I'll give a few more seconds here for people to sign on and log in their responses. We're seeing the greater majority of people saying that they do definitively know someone. Could be yourself. And I see some people dropping into the chat that they do know and not able to access the poll. That's great. Thanks for that. Thanks for participating regardless of that. can be sometimes difficult for some people. But yeah, we can't always know. Let's take a look at what we mean by these terms, and that might clarify some things a little bit for us. We've got these two terms, neurodiversity and neurodivergent, and they don't actually mean the exact same thing. So neurodiversity is that the fact that we all have a variation in our brain function. We are human beings. It goes right alongside with everything that we know about diversity. As humans, we are distinct, unique. So there is going to be neurodiversity as soon as you've got more than one person. So that's a natural variation, neurological variation that exists among humans. Whereas being neurodivergent is the term that we are used for people whose brain functions and processes deviate from what we would consider to be typical. And so that's why sometimes people refer to neuroatypical. It just means that if we were to plot everyone on a normal curve, these people would fall outside of what would be considered typical in terms of processing and functioning. And so that's why we use that term neurotypical, using rather than saying normal or abnormal. Those kinds of things really are inappropriate. So it's easier to just say this person is neurotypical, their brain functions the way we would sort of expect, or the great majority of people do, and this other person would be considered neurodivergent because theirs is slightly different on one end or the other of that scale. So that's how we use these two terms. We use the term neurodivergent because it advocates for an acceptance, an inclusion, an accommodation of individuals that have all those diverse neurological characteristics. We want to emphasize strengths when we're talking about this topic. We want to advocate for equal opportunities and access for people, whether they be neurodivergent or neurotypical. So let's take a look at some of the things that fall under that umbrella of neurodivergence. So this is not an exhaustive list, but this are some of the more common areas that you may have heard of. So we've got autism, ADHD, those two are spoken of a lot. People hear about that one. Dyslexia as well will enter into that. Dyspraxia, Tourette's syndrome, OCD, depression, generalized anxiety, among many other, and often these will superimpose upon each other or have what they call in the medical terminology, which I've never really liked, but comorbidity. They exist simultaneously. So just as I'm sure you heard this, that if you know one autistic person, you know one autistic person. And that is true about almost all of these. They do have some things in common, but even within the neurodivergent field, each of these individuals is still an individual, and their neurodivergence is going to show up likely quite differently. And so you can't always, put everyone in a neat little box. We still have to get to know the individual and deal with that individual, right? So that same amount of diversity is going to exist within and among all the conditions that we have under this umbrella of neurodivergent.
I want to just jump in there to say that sometimes there are folks that identify as neurodivergent that don't have a specific diagnosed condition or a label to attach to them. Maybe they've chosen not to. They've self-assessed perhaps for all kinds of reasons I'm sure we'll get into. But you can identify as neurodivergent even without a formal diagnosis.
Yes, that is true. And
open membership community.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's quite a common occurrence as well. And this is a good time to have mentioned that. And I think you have some more to add to this as well. But let's just look at just the basic, these stats are from 2017. And as we know, often with conditions and disabilities, these can be underreported and not always diagnosed. But from what we know, 1 in 5 people over the age of 15 in this country has one or more disabilities. There's an estimated 15% of the population considered to be neurodivergent. And 33% of Canadian adults with autism are unemployed, and that is compared to 79% of adults without a disability. So those are the stats that we're able to get, but there's more to this story. And Kristin, you have a really great bit of information to add to this that really puts this into perspective.
Oh, I have all kinds. You'll probably have to shut me up at some point. This is my special interest, so I can absolutely go on for a long time. I do want to put an asterisk next to the 1 in 5. That is the official statistic that we're working from. However, as was pointed out in the chat, access to diagnostic services is heavily rich with barriers, depending on simply being a woman right away. Most of the early studies, the early diagnoses were entirely based on young boys. Being an adult woman, non-binary, a member of the LGBTQ2IA+ community also may take you out of statistics. Any marginalized community may pull you out of statistics. And access to those diagnostic services is, there are a lot of barriers. Here in Canada, we have provincial healthcare, which is great, but it doesn't usually cover psychological assessments for adults. There are some services available for children, but if you're an adult, like if you're in your mid-40s like I am, and you're seeking answers as to why life has been so damn difficult, you're probably paying out of pocket. And my personal exploration in this area came up to the tune of $4,000 out of pocket. And let me tell you, that took a while to save up, to be able to pull together. And so this is why we say self-assessment, self-diagnosis are absolutely valid in this area as well. And I've seen statistics for unemployment for autistic folks as high as 85%. That's an American statistic I'll throw in there as well. So depending on the industry, depending on the region, there's a lot of variance in those statistics as well.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Thanks so much for that little addition there, Kristin. Let's take a look at the 6 principles of neurodiversity. So where we can diverge, where we can be different, where these things will show up. And so these are the areas that we will note. So as I said, all people within that umbrella are going to be unique in their own right, but these are the areas that may be enhanced, affected, etc. So the communication area, the connection, how we relate to other people, build relationship, that kind of thing. Emotion, how we show or don't show or are perceived, and I'm going to say that clearly, a perceived mismatch between the situation and the emotion may be present. That flexibility, being able to adapt to change, can be affected by people who are neurodivergent. And structure. So structure is an important facet when we are trying to accommodate, where we are trying to include people in our workplaces. And then the environment, and there's a lot about the environment that we can talk about. As a matter of fact, we could spend just the full hour talking about that. But the sensory differences that can occur, and the solutions that might be required in order to allow someone to show up and be their best self at work. So those are kind of the areas that can be affected, that can be areas where people will note that they may not fit within that neurotypical sphere. So when we're talking about communication, and again, this can show up in so many different ways, but you may find that people who are neurodivergent may focus on the exact words, and I speak from experience. You will hear, but that's not what you said. This was what you said. These were the words. So that is something that we don't always take into account when we're having conversations with people, because we tend to do a lot of use of analogies and some subtleties, right? And we use our tone, our intonation, and our pace to convey that sometimes, and not everyone's going to pick up on that. Or gestures, eye contact, use of hands or body could differ. So we might have someone who tends to interrupt. That's something that we often see in some of these conditions or neurodivergent people. So all of the communication facets may differ in a lot of different ways. And then the connection piece. We may see differences in interactions, and these are just some. Again, there's just a whole host of them. But how those interactions are initiated may not fall into what we typically would see. The understanding and reading of body language may or may not, or may be hyper focused on. And then the emotional expression and facial expression, eye contact will affect those interactions and connections. And then when we're talking about emotions, right, there could be differences in how emotions are experienced and expressed. And this isn't only true of people who are neurodivergent. I'm also someone who does a lot of training in intercultural interactions. And there are cultures where it is not appropriate to show emotions. And if you are coming from a culture where that is appropriate, then all of a sudden there's this disconnect. And then there's a kind of assumption about how engaged the other person is. So this exists in a lot of other areas as well. Sometimes we might see an unexpected emotional reaction. So again, taking us out of that typical realm into what we weren't expecting. Often there'll be a judgment or an assumption about what's appropriate in terms of those reactions and behaviors. We may see an under responsiveness or an over responsiveness that will also lend to, those judgments and assumptions. So there's that disconnect between emotions that neurotypical individuals are expecting and the emotions that they may see reflected from those neurodivergent individuals. And then in terms of flexibility, some people who are neurodivergent will need, to have multiple pathways to achieve goals. The uncertainty, how do they deal with uncertainty? That can be sometimes an obstacle or a challenge, or incorporating new information into something that's already been established. And then, of course, adjusting to changes. And I understand that a lot of people, don't adjust well to changes, but this is very much a challenge for some areas of neurodivergent individuals. So we'll just keep that in mind. And that is the case for any condition. That doesn't mean that just because I've got this condition called this, and one of the markers of it is this, and that means that nobody else has that. We often hear that. Yeah, I do that too. I had a mother who had Alzheimer's, and when she was first starting, I would get people saying, "Does your mom really have Alzheimer's? Because I don't see it." And I'd say, "Yes, she's struggling with this and this and this." And then, "Well, I struggle with that too." I just want to put it out there that that's really minimizing the way that person has to navigate their world. Just because you may see yourself in some of these, that doesn't mean that, well, everybody has that, and it's that's what all typical people have. So let's just keep that in mind, that this is a confluence of many different things that neurodivergent people are dealing with.
I love that you brought that up, and the chat is definitely agreeing with you. And sometimes it's not just about whether everyone experiences it to some degree or not. It's whether you experience it to a degree that is disabling in general society. Yeah. And that's the difference.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, honestly, I forgot to check my passport. I'm going overseas on Sunday and realized my passport was expired this morning. That just makes me, whatever. I had a bad week and I didn't check it. I should have. All right, structure, right? So neurodivergent people often need a lot of clarity about expectations and outcomes, specifics sometimes about how things should be done, or the opposing, right? So there's this duality of each of these. Too much specifics for some neurodivergent people can be difficult as well. Breaking down tasks, sometimes that can be a challenge, or planning for the unexpected is sometimes useful for preparing neurodivergent people for what's to come or for the changes that may arrive. Now, we talked about the environment. This one can be huge, and I mean, it's been 30 years that I've been involved in this aspect, or I've been aware of it, and I'm still learning about, I mean, I just can't imagine what that would be like. So that sensory over responsivity, that can be very irritating for someone who has to filter all that out, and it doesn't happen easily. It can be confusing. It can be physical discomfort or pain or feeling overwhelmed. If you're in the middle of a panic attack, that physically is painful. And it is very difficult to just relax. It just doesn't happen that easily. And then when you're filtering out these environmental stimuli all day long, you can be quite irritable by the end of the day because you've been trying to hold everything in. So these are things that we need to be aware of, right? Tuning out that is very, very energy consuming. It's exhausting. And so many times neurodivergent people at the end of the day are exhausted. So I don't know if any of you have heard the discussion about spoons. It's a really good example about how how we say, well, you know, this is just a normal day. You have to go, you have to get up, you have to do your stuff, you got to go to work, you come home. Well, we all have a certain amount of spoons, of energy spoons. And what can take me one spoon to do, getting up and getting ready, brushing my teeth, getting dressed, having a cup of coffee, getting my stuff together, getting out the door, that's one spoon for me. For my husband, who has ADHD, that's like 5 spoons. Easily. Because every single step has to be thought about and considered, and it just doesn't automatically happen. So that's what we're talking about the spoons. That what may seem like a fairly simple task to a neurotypical person can be very exhausting to a neurodivergent person. So let's briefly go over these challenges so that we can get into our discussion with Kristin. I really want to hand it over to Kristin and hear from you, Kristin. So what are the benefits? So why should we bother getting these people in the workplace? Well, there's a lot of benefits. People who are neurodivergent, as you can well imagine, as I could see from Kristin's background, right? Greater innovation, creativity out the wazoo, unique perspectives, great problem solving. I mean, I say this about my one son all the time. It's like, I've never seen anybody problem solve, and my husband problem solve so well, because that lack of foresight, that risk taking and jumping in, they have to. They have to be able to problem solve and they're amazing at it. So increase productivity and efficiency if we give them the tools and remove the obstacles for them. So they're a great addition to the staff. It's well worth getting neurodivergent people in your workplace. But it's not easy. It's not going to be a cakewalk for sure. There is lack of awareness and understanding, right, of what the needs of neurodivergent employees. And as I said at the outset, there isn't a one solution fits all. So that adds a little bit of complexity to it, right? And then the accommodations can seem difficult. Like, what accommodations are we going to need to put in place? And then there's a recruitment of going and getting these individuals and then retaining them. So that's definitely something that needs to be considered on the side of the employee. So let's start with our discussion, and then we'll turn over to the Q&A. And what I want to start with is just really brief. Then I'm going to go real quick because my story is not nearly as interesting as Kristin's. But here's why this interests the two of us. So we both have a connection to this, and as you've heard me kind of mention, I have a lot of people in my family who are neurodivergent. So as a mother of four, I have a son who has autism. I have a son who has OCD. I have another who is ADHD. And the fourth, my only daughter, has had agoraphobia and generalized anxiety disorder. And so I've been dealing with this as a neurotypical, going, what is that? Like, why are these individuals who seem so smart and so creative and so capable struggling with simple things, what seems simple to me? And then, of course, in my family, in my husband and his family, ADHD is very common, and he definitely has signs of it. Now, of those people, only 3 have been diagnosed. The other 2, and I think which is quite typical, the ADHD, they've never bothered to get a diagnosis, and it isn't, you know, and that again is a spectrum, and they've managed to just muddle through with it. So that's my story. That's how I came to this. But Kristin, tell us a bit about yourself and how you came to be involved as an advocate.
Sure. From multiple angles, which is, of course, the typical way of putting this. For my family, I grew up in the 90s and nobody was talking about neurodiversity back in the 90s. We heard ADHD a little bit, but it was always referring to young boys that were hyperactive. Girls were left out of the conversation entirely. We didn't even have terminology for non-binary yet. My immediate family, mental illness played a big part. In our family, multiple breakdowns, long absences from work. Between the bunch of us, I don't know if there's an antidepressant that we haven't tried. And that's where it all came to a T for me in my mid-30s. Was the depression angle, the depression and anxiety, panic attacks, that whole side of things. I was an expert masker. I had some exposure to autism through my stepsister. My dad remarried when I finished high school, and my stepsister is primarily non-speaking autistic, and to me that was autism. So it never even occurred to me that myself or anyone else in the family could possibly be on the same spectrum. I just didn't have any concept of that. I thought, well, I have depression, that's just it, and all of my struggles in life and the reason I suck at everything I try to do is because of depression. And that made at least some sense to my brain, even though it was a horrible realization. And I won't get into it too much here, but I have spoken publicly a lot about my own breakdown, my own brush with suicide, and the 8 weeks over 2 occasions that I spent in psychiatric hospitals under treatment for major depressive disorder. And it wasn't until into my 40s that I was introduced to the possibility that there could be more to it, more to who I am and how my mind works and how I perceive the world and input different sensory things. It was a fairly recent, in the last sort of 3-4 years, bit of discovery, and now multiple members of my family are going through the same self-discovery and exploring varying degrees of formal diagnosis. I now understand a lot more. I'm still learning. I'm still going through different assessments. I'm still learning my full, overlapping pie chart of who I am and how my brain works. But I'm realizing that my career is a menu. I've had so many different careers, not because I was non-committal or lazy, quite the opposite. I would go in hard, whether I was a nutritionist, a wedding planner, a marketing director, or an employee engagement. It didn't matter. I went in hard, trying to make up the difference for what I thought were all of my everything I thought I lacked. And I'm now learning that it's just that my brain worked differently and that society wasn't adjusted for how my brain wanted to work. And now that I'm learning that and starting to make adjustments for my brain and how it best behaves, things are looking up. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation again.
That's so great to hear, Kristin. Could you share with us a few of the experiences and challenges that you've had due to your neurodivergence in the workplace? Just a couple of things that you can highlight that really stick out. I'm sure there's lots, but what kinds of things have personally been challenging for you in the workplace?
Misunderstandings. So what I'm feeling and what my face projects don't always match. That's a pretty common one. I'm seeing yes, I'm sure this is going to be familiar to a lot of people. Anyone else been written up for insubordination multiple times? Not because I was questioning my superiors, but because I didn't fully understand the purpose. And if I didn't understand why A was going to B and going to C in order to make it work with my brain, then my face would scrunch up. And I was just trying to make sense of what I was being asked to do, but it was immediately read as insubordination, as second guessing, been written up on multiple occasions for things like that, accused of only wanting things my way if I expressed a concern over a particular way of doing things. And believe me, I don't want things my way. It was never about that. It was more, ADHD is interesting. It's called attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but it's not always that we have a deficit of attention. It's that we're giving attention equally to absolutely everything around us. And sometimes being able to filter, asking the questions to be able to filter our attention onto the thing that we're supposed to be dealing with is the real challenge in that area. And sometimes the process of me trying to filter the facts down to what I needed in order to complete the task was completely misunderstood and misread. And that was endlessly frustrating and left me feeling that I was the one in the wrong and there was something wrong with me.
Thanks for sharing that. I think I've experienced the same with employees that we've had on staff. And another thing that I've recently, especially in terms of autism, is the detailed questioning and the misunderstandings that lead to that. So I've had people say, so-and-so doesn't even seem to know what we do. And it's like, they do know. They're just checking and making sure that they're not making any assumptions, that they've covered all the bases and that they really, truly understand it, rather than jumping to that assumption that, why are you asking those questions? Those are obvious questions, right? Or same in policies. I would often get, we had two autistic people with autism on our staff, and both were very knowledgeable about their condition, and they were great for reviewing the policies. And whenever there was anything ambiguous, it was just like, this needs to be spelled out. There needs to be a link. There needs to be this kind of thing. So it was great. And I think a lot of times people do jump to conclusions about you.
They do, and it comes down to what we're familiar with, right? If you've only ever been surrounded in people that reflected your way of reading facial expressions and processing information, when somebody different comes into the mix, I think there's an element of human nature to just zero in on what's different about that person and assume that majority rules. And that the rest of us are correct. Eye contact's one that has come up as recently as last week for me. I can look you in the eye. I'm looking my camera in the eye right now, obviously, but I can look you in the eye when you're talking to me. Or I can listen to the details of what you're saying. But if you want both to happen at the same time, I can't guarantee that's going to work. Even when I'm doing a presentation or public speaking, or even discussing something with members of my team at my day job, if I'm active listening, if I'm looking people in the eye to make connections while we're talking, all of my spoons, all of my focus goes into the head nods and the maintaining the eye contact and the presenting, neurotypically as best as possible. And the information that I needed to convey, gone. And that is why sometimes I'm very guilty for interrupting. I am so sorry to everyone I work with or have worked with in the past. I've probably cut you off. I'm cutting you off today. If I don't say it immediately, it's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the challenges.
Yeah.
This chat is going on. Woo!
I know it's going crazy. Let's get to the questions after just this last little bit. I'd just like to know, in your experience, what kinds of things have been helpful for you in the workplaces? What kinds of advice do you have for employers and employees that they can go in and present to their employees of what might be helpful to alleviate some of these challenges?
Options and understanding would be the two things that I want to talk about here. And I'm saying them out loud in case I need you to remind me later of the two. I'll start with understanding. I'm very lucky right now to have a director that makes a concentrated effort to understand when I'm overloaded, when I'm seeing the forest and unable to look at the trees, when I'm taking on, my empathy has gone haywire and I'm taking on too much of everybody else's stress around me. I have a wonderful director who puts that time in and works with me to adjust to the ebb and flow. I have hyper-focused days where I get more done than really should be possible in an 8-hour day, and others where I forget how a spacebar works. And it's just the brain comes and goes a little bit, and it's so frustrating. But the averages overall are awesome. Are fantastic. Options being the other one. And if you only have one rigid way that something can be executed in your office, in your workplace, in your relationship, odds are good you're going to run into problems there. So having that flexibility that, is feedback on a report given verbally? Is it given in written format? Is it given 2 days later? Being able to ebb and flow with the students really of the person that you're dealing with can be incredibly important. And if you're not sure what to say, if you have a team member or a friend or somebody in your family that you can see is struggling, but you're not sure why, or what, they may not even know why yet. But a good question to ask is, how can I best support you?
Yeah.
Because it's acknowledging that they're feeling unsupported. It's validation of the struggle that they're feeling right now. And it's giving them the agency as adults, or even as children, to be a part of the process, to coming up with the accommodations, the flexibility, whatever's needed. Sorry, there was a tiny bug on my computer screen right now that is grabbing all of my attention. See what I mean? Whoa, right onto this little beetle on my laptop. God,
All right. So gaining that understanding, Kristin, would you really, you have to be your own advocate. You have to say, this is what I need, or can I, like,
yes, you can.
That flexibility, like, to me, that probably extends into, or should, or could, and be helpful into working hours because of that hyper focus. And then, right, that flexibility.
I'm sometimes at my best on Saturday mornings, and that is not what the working world tells me.
Yeah, exactly. And having that ability, and then, as you said, the different ways of receiving the information and checking in.
And we may not always know. So I mean, look, I'm even doing it right now. I'm like a walking example. We may not know what we need. We may just know we're struggling. It may just manifest as anxiety, as stress, as extra perspiration. An autistic meltdown can feel like a panic attack and result in paralyzation almost. And we may not be able to articulate in those moments, oh, I need a little flexibility in my work hours. But by developing trust and open communication between the team members, between the family members, it'll make it easier when those times hit. Yeah. So as an employer, as a people leader, for example, being vulnerable with your own experiences, even if you consider yourself neurotypical with no comorbidities, there's that word again, you still have days that are more productive than other days. You have stuff going on in your personal life that's going to pull your attention. None of us are perfect robots that can shut it all off the second we walk into our workplace.
Mhm.
So being vulnerable about your own day-to-day struggles will maybe open the door a little bit more for your team to be open with you.
Awesome. That's great, great closing advice there. Let's get to some of these Q&A questions. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Apurva, to sort of let us know what questions seem to be coming forth, and we'll see what we can do with those. I'm just going to open it because she may actually not be there.
I'm loving the chat, by the way. Thank you to everyone that's sharing their knowledge and their experiences and their recommendations. There, like you said, there are no two people alike, no two brains alike, no two minds alike. And what works for one may not work for someone else, but collectively we'll all find what works.
All right. So we've got some of these questions. How does cognitive diversity relate to neurodiversity?
I hear cognitive diversity brought in a lot more when you're speaking about learning differences, brain injuries, Tourette's, epilepsy, things like that as well. Dyslexia gets the most attention, which is letters reading and things like that. You've also got dyspraxia, which came up. I think I saw some questions about that earlier. Dyspraxia is more of a motor control, and dyscalculia is math. I'm in the hypocalculia category. I need a calculator for single digit adding, and yet my mother can hear 6-digit numbers, multiply them together, and find the exponential root. I don't know what any of that means, but she's amazing. Done. Gets the numbers out of anywhere. So it's all the same umbrella.
Yeah.
Your mileage may vary depending on your particular combination.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, in my case, my son was diagnosed with nonverbal learning disorder. So it was a learning disorder, and only, recently or years later, it came under the umbrella of autism. So he had dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, all of those things that not everybody on the autism spectrum will experience because it was nonverbal. In other words, very verbal, high vocabulary, had to do everything orally, which is sort of counterintuitive to what one would sort of expect from someone on the autism spectrum. So what is the recommended way of communication for neurodivergent folks? That's
the way that works for the two in question.
Yep. Yeah. Because we're dealing with so much diversity here, it really has to be in partnership with that individual. So I guess your observation skills have to be honed. Observe how they communicate and try to mirror it back, try to be open to their communication style. That may help.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something called the double empathy problem, where there's this expectation that the neurodivergent person will make the adjustments to match the neurotypical way of communicating, when really the best is halfway in between.
Yeah, accept. And again, as you said, acceptance. Understand that this is going to be a different way of communicating. And again, this is also the case across cultures. Yeah. So these are just great skills for everyone really to have in this day and age. Does dementia fall under the neurodivergent umbrella?
Sure can.
I think so. Yeah, definitely, because that's going to be a different way of processing information, right? And taking it in. So for sure, I would see that. All right. We've got, can you please explain dyspraxia? Well, the way it was described to me was, and Chris, it's been a while, so I'm going from, like, my eldest is 34, so it was when he was starting to write that, it was the fine motor skills, it was the ability to stay within confined lines. He had to go to a occupational therapist to work on those fine motor skills. So these things were evident like as grade 1. Everyone else, and then when we were talking about spoons, it was that, like, go home and copy this letter, so many times in your little book. Exhausting when you have to think about every little thing. It's a little different nowadays with computers, but back then I actually got had to get him by grade 5. I had to get him it was like a kind of like a computer typewriter type of thing, because it was before the age of that, and had to say, look, he can do it, but let him type it, because it's way easier than trying to write.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know.
Speaking doesn't mean non-thinking.
Yeah.
So just because a person expresses themselves differently through an iPad, through typing, through I don't know, shadow puppets, doesn't mean that they're not thinking. Also with dyspraxia, sometimes it's early diagnosis may come from what we traditionally would say clumsy. The brain may say put foot there, and the foot goes somewhere else altogether.
Yeah, not knowing your what did they call that? Being proprioception. Your proprioception being off. Yeah, definitely saw that too.
I know for me, one of mine is working memory. So I describe this is going to make me sound very old, but having a Rolodex going in my brain at all times, which, has all my little card slots of information. And if I see a dog in the park that's a very interesting looking dog, now all the input of the dog is in the Rolodex, so something else had to go. And that only so much can be held in there at any one time. And so maybe the ability to walk up or down a flight of stairs or complete a sentence without stumbling over it goes by the wayside for that little temporary moment. Awesome. Interesting questions in here.
I'm really curious about anxiety and or depression being neurodivergent. I've only recently learned this. My previous understanding was that if you are neurodivergent, sorry, it keeps clicking away.
Yes, you are born that way and stay that way. How does this apply to conditions that are potentially transient, such as depression? There's a lot of research happening in this area right now as well. Myself as well, I did not consider depression, anxiety, and neurodivergence the same. I thought they were two separate but overlapping umbrellas, but it's very recently that we're really starting to look at it all as at one. For some folks, depression is situational. It may be in response to something that is happening in your life. It may be in response to an imbalance in, could be B vitamins, omega-3s, any number of things in your body, or as a byproduct of another illness or another disability, or trauma even that you're experiencing in life. Sorry, just happened right now. Right, anxiety and depression. So for some folks, it is hard-coded more into who they are. There are genetic components to certain mental illnesses. So it's possible that if you're more genetically prone to major depressive disorder, that is built into your genes, and it's just whether or not it expresses at any point in your life. And it can be the same for neurodivergent conditions. It doesn't mean that it'll always present the same as a toddler as it will as an adult. One thing can intensify another. I was reading some research earlier this morning about women's hormonal cycles and how that can affect ADHD. And how, depending on what point of your cycle you're in, you'll have that much bigger challenge with things like focus, working memory, things like that. And so that's a really fascinating research that's happening now as they're starting to see the components that go towards that. And yes, thank you to the comment that men have hormones too. Absolutely. I just happened to be reading research this morning about the menstrual cycle for those that menstruate.
That's really,
if it helps, if you have a diagnosed mood disorder or you're experiencing depression, if it helps to adopt the personality of neurodivergent, go for it. Nobody's going to stop you. There's no membership form. If that label fits, if you feel good under that, if that gives you some self-compassion, go for it. Absolutely. If not, go for it. Your mileage may vary.
It's all about coping mechanisms, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great, thanks. That was a really great question. Population numbers. Somebody's posted some different ones, and for sure it is difficult to pin down these numbers. So there's different ones. Mine was from Stats Canada. It was the most recent one that I could find from Stats Canada, but there you can get them from all over. 15%. Much higher. And also, as Kristin pointed out, once you start that intersectionality, that changes the numbers as well, for sure. Absolutely. Former employer talked a good name of providing support to neurodiverse employees. However, at the managerial level, there was little uptake. A case in point was a review of certain actions on my part. The manager in question stated that he felt I was using mental health issues as a crutch.
Oh, I'm infuriated.
As soon as someone says, "Oh, you're pulling the blah 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 card," That's when you get worried. Any suggestions for how acceptance of neurodiversity can be better accepted from the top down? The employer is a major employer. There's lip service applied by HR. Senior management often ignores resources that HR have made. So how can we gain that acceptance from the top down? Any insight on that?
Yeah, education's a big one. We don't know what we don't know. If it's possible to get some neurodiversity training for your top level of management, your senior leaders, even if you want to message me after, I can help make a business case for you to make that happen. Focusing on productivity changes, on less human rights complaints, DEI, whatever angle you need to take, being able to have that education can really open a lot of doors of discussion. You can also go at it from the mental health angle. There are huge overlaps between the neurodivergent struggle and mental health conditions as well. Being autistic, for example, leaves you 70 and to 80% more likely to also have a mental illness. So by adapting for one, you may reduce the instance of mental health issues, which is the number one cause, the number one disease burden, at least in Ontario, is mental illness. So if we come at it from that angle and they believe that there could be cost savings, that may open some doors for you as well.
Yeah, I had something in my head too, and now it's gone about that.
It's contagious.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, I know we often say to when we give our training that, you know, it shouldn't be the burden of the individual, of the equity deserving group to educate everyone else. And that is true. It shouldn't be your burden. Unfortunately, sometimes it is. But if you could get an outside group, often people will listen to an outside group before they will listen to the individual on staff. So that can be helpful. The other thing I wanted to add to that, which again, it seems to have left my head, was, I often point out that a lot of the accommodations are actually helpful to everybody.
Yep, absolutely, could be.
So I've had people say, you know, come back from leave, and okay, what's the accommodation plan as you reintegrate to the workforce? And you know, it's like I need written documentation of meetings, because I can't keep all this in my head for whatever reason because of my condition. So I need a follow-up with bullet points, or I need to have a written transcript of what was decided. And my reaction is, great. Those are great things for everybody in the meeting. Like, they're helpful to everybody. And often that's the case. So when you can, pointing out that, you know, this could be helpful to more than just myself, I think might smooth the way a little bit. But it unfortunately you end up sort of having to advocate for yourself, and that's an added burden for sure. Okay, what else?
I see a bunch of questions from an HR perspective. I do work with an HR department regarding making the interview process a bit more inclusive. So just this, we could talk a full hour on this, but just quickly having options available, giving the questions in advance. Some folks take longer to process information, a little longer to get things out of the Rolodex. It doesn't mean they don't have the experience. It doesn't mean they're not capable of doing the job. They just may not be able to spit out the example at the spur of the moment. And unless that is a specific skill that's required for the job, give them the questions. Let them come up with their notes ahead of time.
Yeah, and I always preface with, we're not trying to hide or pull anything. Or if you're not quite sure what we're trying to get at, just ask. And I often will ask the question and say, what we're trying to find out here is your process for this. Just like be very open with what it is that you are trying to glean from the individuals. Well, listen, this was so fascinating. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate all that you had to say, all your great information and experience. I do have some contact information here, LinkedIn newsletter that you can scan if you wish. Thanks to everyone for participating, and see you at the next one.